Going back to the regularly scheduled programming. All right, Yeet Future Master, welcome. So I think I'm going to get started now. So I prepared something here about candidate moves. This is something that everybody who knows me should know about by now, because candidate moves, in my opinion, are the first step of good calculation. So I guess I should start with the definition of candidate moves, because some people who are going to watch this are probably not familiar. But candidate moves is a technique that was probably first named by Kotov, who wrote a book with a title like Think Like a Grandmaster, which was not super amazing, but had this really neat idea about how you should calculate in a good way. So the calculation process, it basically has 3 steps, and I'll just put them in the chat. The first step is finding ideas and moves that suit those ideas. These are the candidate moves. The second part is analyzing those moves that you found in the first step. And the third step is you just play the move that gives a satisfactory result. So people who calculate in a more maybe intuitive way, or who don't calculate at all, they probably think about this in a different way. They probably think about, you pick a move and then you try your best to justify it. And if you can justify the move, then you play that move. This is kind of a backwards approach compared to how a lot of top trainers and top players have described their own calculation technique. So the reason you don't do it this other way, where you pick a move and then you try your best to justify it, is, well, there's probably many reasons why. One reason is that you should probably recognize that you can justify almost any move if you try hard enough. So it's actually probably more critical to try to refute your idea instead of just try to justify it. What's another reason that this is not so good? Another reason could be that you're simply not considering many moves. If you think about chess as a game where in any position there's just one good move, if you consider only one move, your likelihood of selecting that move is probably lower than if you had just selected a random move. In fact, in some positions, people just pick a move which is logical to them, but even a coin toss would have beaten them because there's like 2 options, but for some reason, people almost always pick the wrong move. So it's important to consider all moves that are relevant, but of course not every single move. Like I said in my description a second ago, you need to find ideas and moves that fit those ideas. That's why we don't play chess analytically, where we just look at every single possible move and decide what to do based on that. We narrow it down to moves which have some common sense behind them. So this is our first position, which is really quite easy. It's white to play. And I'd just like to know what anyone who's watching thinks of this position, like how you would evaluate it, and also maybe what move you would play here for white. It's not a trick question. It's just our first candidate moves exercise, and I tried to go in order of easy to difficult, or at least less complicated to more complicated. So let's get some votes. Any suggestions? Motosems, thank you for your reply. You say it's equal, and Yeet Future Master is suggesting a move. So why don't we level this? So Motosems, I think I'm reading that right, is suggesting it's equal. So maybe you could explain why you think it's equal, and Yeet Future Master, maybe you could explain why you're choosing Rook A8. I think if we combine the way that you guys are thinking, we'll probably come closer to the truth. Okay, so Yeet Future Master agrees that it's equal, but suggests that the move would anyway be Rook A8. So I'm guessing that you guys are both evaluating this for the same reason, or I'm sorry, in the same way, not for the same reason. Of course, we're evaluating it because we want to understand the position. But you're saying that it's equal because we've counted the pieces and we see they are the same. So I made another video. If you guys would like to see it, it's still here on Twitch, but I also posted it on YouTube in a slightly edited form. And so you can check out my YouTube channel, and there's a video with a title that has the keyword evaluation, in which I took the viewers through several examples in which we evaluate a variety of positions before doing any calculation. So there are 3 things that I mentioned that you need to consider when you evaluate any position. They are king safety, piece activity, and material. And I'm just typing that in the chat so you guys can see. So these are the 3 things, and they're more or less in order of importance. I heard Coach Ramesh in one session say that he has observed that beginners frequently have this upside down. They consider material and pawn structure to be even more important than the safety of the king or the activity of the pieces. And this somewhat matches my experience. Although he also said you'll rarely see beginners with bad pawn structure, and I've seen some really terrible games. Frequently beginners push all the pawns in front of their king and they get weak that way. But my point is, these are 3 things, right? It's not one thing. So in this position, it's not just about material. It's also about activity and king safety. And it turns out that all 3 of these things come into play here. But we could also solve this in a more or less candidate move fashion. So stemming from the evaluation, even if we did think it was equal, okay, maybe it's about equal. You know, both kings are on the edge of the board, so both kings are kind of not active. Black's rook is maybe slightly more active than white's rook, but white could match that by playing rook a7 or rook a8 maybe with the intention to play rook a6 or something. But if we just look at it from the standpoint of what are all the possible moves that we could play, you can actually solve this puzzle somewhat easily. So let's see, maybe you guys should just make a list. What are all the possible moves? There are actually not that many, so it should be easy to make a list. All right, so rook d1 check. That's one of the moves, and we already said rook a8 check. So those are the 2 checks that we spotted. Rook a7, good. So just keep going, and I'll let you know if you missed any of them. Let's just spam the chat. Hit me with all the moves possible here. I know it's a long list, but trust me, you guys will benefit from figuring it out. a3, a4, a5. You missed rook a2. That's an interesting thing. So like I said, we're looking for possible moves. Moves with an idea. So rook a2, even though you can rule it out easily, it's still a move. So we shouldn't just eliminate it completely. In simple positions where there are not many things, you should actually consider every legal move sometimes, just to keep yourself fresh. Also, in the flow chart of the calculation, we do candidates, and then analysis, and then decision. Another thing that I've noticed about beginner chess players is they pick a move, they decide if it's good or bad, and then they play it. There's not really an analysis part. Okay, so Yeet Future Master, you both missed the same move. There's a king move that you both missed. So if you guys can answer that question, what move did you miss? You will know the answer to this puzzle. It's the only move you didn't consider. Castling, very good. In this position, castling long wins a rook. So what gives, right? So there are a couple reasons someone might not solve this puzzle. Yeah, oof indeed. One reason you might not solve this puzzle is because your pattern recognition has betrayed you. You've developed this pattern in your mind that says that all positions where we have one rook each are drawn. There are actually many positions where one rook to each side is not a draw at all, especially a position like this. Another pattern that your brain might have internalized that is leading you astray is at this probably late stage of the game, there's no way that you still have castling rights. This is another common logical fallacy. And the way that you overcome these kinds of cognitive biases is, number one, you see more positions that are similar. So if you see many positions where you castle and win the game, you guys will start spotting it more often. But that takes a lot of work. You could also just change the way that you calculate in the first place by incorporating this candidate move step, where you force yourself to spot moves that could have some conceivable purpose, but were not easy for you to spot previously. Jacob Ogard sometimes says that calculation is kind of a process where you are looking for things that you don't see normally. And I think this is a pretty good, although somewhat evasive, definition for calculation. So if you miss winning moves, your calculation process should be the way in which you spot those moves that you don't normally see. And candidate moves is frequently a good way of figuring it out. If you ever solve a puzzle or fail to solve a puzzle that you attempted and you don't know why you missed that puzzle, you should probably ask yourself, did I even spot the move that I would play to win this game? Or on another level, which is equally important, did I spot what my opponent would play that made the answer I chose incorrect? Here, there's no problem of spotting black's moves. The problem is only of spotting your own moves, which is why I picked it as the first example. It's interesting. So any questions, or shall we move on to the next one?